As we get closer to seed starting time, I'm putting together my seed starting materials. I've done this a lot of ways over the years, and I want to talk today about a few different things that I've used and what I've landed on. One thing that I bought early on was some nice, heavy, durable trays. These are called 10-20 trays. They're 10 inches by 20 inches. And having some of these is great just to hold your seedlings in place. Then you can move them inside, outside. For quite a few years, we just used recycled containers. Milk cartons, yogurt containers, coffee cups. They were great because they were free, they were available. It was a use for garbage. What I found was when I was trying to use containers, I couldn't fit very many in one of these 10-20 trays. I don't have a lot of smaller containers. I was using coffee cups for a while, but in a lot of cases, you don't want to start seeds in a container this big because it's going to be a long time before the plant is big enough to fill it. And then you don't have as much room under your lights for all of that time. So I've stopped using recycled containers. So another thing that I've tried over the years is using this pot maker. Basically, the idea is you can take a piece of recycled paper, newspaper, wrap it around, and then what this tool does is it just sort of smushes the bottom and holds it. And then you have a small container that then you can fill with soil. I did this for a number of years. I found it pretty time consuming. It takes a while to make these little pots. And sometimes they stay together and sometimes they fall apart. I found that they fell apart often before they were ready to go in the ground. The newspaper would start to disintegrate and they would be hard to move around individually, which is good because you want the roots to be able to grow through the newspaper when they go in the ground and the newspaper to biodegrade. One of the best things about this is that you don't need to take them out of the container. You can just put the entire container straight in the ground. But actually the reason why I haven't been doing this is because I don't really have any newspapers around anymore. I could go to like the recycling depot and pick up a pile of them. Not probably going to use paper pots this year. What I decided to do was buy some 10-20 tray cell packs. This is a 72 cell tray. So what I really liked about this was it was really easy to grow a lot of plants all in a 10-20 tray. I could fill up a tray with seeds. It was really efficient, really easy to move around. They were easy to fill fast. I just would put them in a container and pack them full of soil and then plant straight into them, put a little bit of soil on top. Really, really simple. But I would say the reason that I'm not going to use them as much this year is that the ones that I got tend to break. I found that, these are falling apart. Another thing that I really do not like about these is that once the plants have been growing in here and the roots are in there and wrapped around and maybe sticking out the bottom, you have to sort of squeeze and pull them to get them out. Often that's really hard to do. So I'll be turning them upside down. I'll be sort of trying to pull the plant from one end without damaging the stem. I'll be pushing it from this end. That is stressful to the small seedling, and I think means that it takes longer when I transplant them into the garden to recover because of that transplant shock. Another thing that I don't like is that they are quite big, and in a lot of cases, I'm not planting 72 plants of one thing. If you have more than one type of plant in a tray like this, it can be hard to sort of treat them differently. And move them around easily because they're kind of stuck together. This year, what I'm going to try and do is use soil blocks. The great thing about soil blocks is that because it's a complete block of soil, you don't have any garbage. When I was using milk cartons or things, I would still be throwing those in the garbage and still putting them in the landfill. Whereas these, there's no containers around them at all. As well, what I find really interesting is that the plants actually will air prune. The plant roots will start growing towards the edge, but then when they reach where there's an airspace, and instead of just stopping growing, they'll start splitting and growing secondary roots within the soil material that they have. It means that it's got a bigger, thicker root system instead of just growing a few roots that start wrapping around and around and around like they do when they hit a plastic wall. As well, as soon as you transplant them into something where they have no more airspace and instead they have soil around them, they're going to start growing right away. So there's no transplant shock involved where they are recovering from the root damage that you caused by taking them out of a container and putting them in the ground. they'll basically start growing right away. I did have to buy the set of soil blockers and it cost about $120, but I'm into making investments in tools that will last a long time. These were made in England. They are pretty good quality, and then I can keep using them year after year after year. So the soil blocks, indeed, you need to wet the soil quite a bit, and this is just Pro Mix. It has a little hole in the top by the dibbler that I can plant a seed in. So these are ready to go, and I think this is a pretty good size to start out with for a lot of different plants that we grow. And then the smaller soil block, this larger soil blocker came with another block that was really easy to switch out from the tiny little one for the seeds, and this fits this. And I think that's where these little seeds are going to be really useful. Not so much as tiny little cubes, they're almost like sugar cube size that you're using to grow the seeds for very long, but just maybe somewhere to grow things until they germinate and then to stick them in a bigger space. And again, that's not going to have any transplant shock when you're moving it. You're just moving it such a small amount, and you don't even have to touch the plant. That's another thing I really like, is that I feel like I can handle these and transplant them without having to touch the plant, without having to grab onto the leaves or touch the stem. The stem has so many important cells that are moving all the nutrients and water up and down. These are some different ways to start seeds, and I'm going to go with soil blocks this year, and we're going to see how it goes. But I'm pretty excited because I feel like it solves some of the problems that I've had with the other methods of seed starting before.